Welcome to 720 and 720. Once again, I'm John Schulman, and we are thrilled to have a big-timer on with us who's got an amazing story. I got a chance to meet him a couple years ago. He came and spoke for us at McCallie at the Dr. Pepper Classic. Ryan Leaf, welcome to 720 and 720. How you doing?
I'm great, Coach. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're a big-timer, man. You've got an amazing story, and the best thing about you is not your looks. There, Ryan Leaf. The best thing about you is your story, and that you're okay with telling your story. And
well, I think it's just it's life,
Well, the rest of us, everybody's got issues. Everybody walking around has issues, and then. But very few of us are in the public eye, and you're in the public eye and big time in the public eye. But because you're in the public eye, I think you can help more people with your story than the normal person, because I mean, there's no way the second pick in the NFL draft can fall. That can't happen, and it did happen, and you were nice enough and human enough to let the rest of us know about it.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've never necessarily looked at it that way. I think I looked at it that way for a long time, and that's what kind of kept me down. That I thought my story was more important for some reason, or more unique. But when I stand in front of a group full of people, I guarantee you that if one of the audience members came up and simply told their life story, their human existence, they've had to deal with some sort of adversity, and they've gotten through it. We're just all flawed human beings trying to be better every single day, and I think that's imperative to remember. Mine just has some unique kind of turns here and there, and usually when you associate NFL and $31 million in the conversation, it kind of gets your foot in the door sometimes, and people may listen up. But I know for a fact, and because I've heard other people tell their testimony and their story, they've been just as impactful as anything that I will say.
Well, I understand that, and you're being modest and nice. But what you've done and what you did for us at McCallie, I still remember going back in that back room, and I remember going there early, and there was some younger guys in there, and I was like, "Who are those guys? Who?" And then I remembered we got a very prominent doctor that's involved with McCallie, and he brought some guys who were struggling with addiction, and he brought those guys down from an area from their kind of their rehab, and just to listen to you. And for those guys, listen, most famous people, and yes, you're famous, most famous people don't want to go there, and they'd rather hide from it, and you didn't hide. And it's amazing how many people that you're helping on a daily level. You're helping a lot of people. You just need to know that.
I appreciate that. It's wonderful to hear. I still am the guy that is used to hearing what an ass he was, and that makes more sense to me. My default setting is still kind of like less than, and I'm working on it every single day, and I really appreciate it. The more I get out there and try to be of service, I think helps take me in that direction as well.
Well, what you probably think, and I used to think this a long time ago, you'd lose a game, and you really thought everybody the next day was at the water cooler talking about your game. And they talked about what a bad coach I was, and this and that, and I can't believe they lost a game. And then I went out there in the real world for a second, and nobody really cared. That's what I figured out. So I want you to understand that nobody's talking about Ryan Leaf having issues and the second pick, and it just didn't work out. They're thinking about their own issues, so at least that takes a little pressure off of you. Ain't nobody talking about and reminiscing about your failures at this moment.
Well, I appreciate, I'm definitely not thinking about that like I used to, right? It was always about someone else, and right now what other people think of me is entirely none of my business, and I use that as a mantra and affirmation I say into the mirror every single day, and it's been helpful.
Well, we're going to talk about some positive things. The first positive thing: how's a kid from Montana, a country kid from Montana, go become a finalist for a Heisman at Washington State? And by the way, if you were at Washington State now under Leach, oh my good God, you would be breaking records, and probably still as crazy as you were at that moment, maybe even crazier. So how does that kid from Montana become a Heisman candidate?
Well, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of vision. I have this dream and this goal, and a lot of help from a lot of people too. My dad was very helpful in bringing me along, and then Mike Price, the head coach at the time, just really taught me how to play the quarterback position, and and my teammates. I mean, we have an amazing team. Football is the epitome of a team sport. It really is. Other sports, one individual could really kind of sway some teams, but that isn't the case in football, right? You have to have everybody functioning and doing the right thing at the same time to be successful. And, we simply had a great team of 100, and we had about 110 players on that team. And we just came together finally in a moment that defined greatness for that school. And it allowed me to get some pretty cool accolades that came with it, and being a part of the Heisman Trophy ceremony was certainly one of them, and really grateful for all of them. But yeah, a lot of hard work, determination, understanding that that it wasn't going to be easy, and I wish I would have kind of had and kept that mindset as I got into the NFL.
Well, let me ask you this coming up, and this podcast, I'm hoping to really hopefully educate and inform either an athlete or a young coach or a business leader. Let me ask you this coming up. Were you a football guy only? Did you play multiple sports? What'd you do out in Montana? There probably wasn't a whole lot to do it. No, I'm just joking. All right, what did you do out there in Montana coming up? Junior high, middle school? Were you just a football guy?
Oh no, I mean, football season was over, and then it was basketball. Basketball season was over, and it was track and field and baseball. And in the summers was really, all about baseball and fishing, and that was my life. Basketball was my favorite sport, and everybody thought I would go on and play basketball. In fact, I even walked on the basketball team at Washington State my freshman year. Mike Price just really finally came to me and said, hey, and I found that out pretty quickly. In 1995, UCLA was the national champions, and they came in and played us, and I got to see firsthand that I probably couldn't make a living at playing basketball, that college football was probably going to have to give me the best shot at that, and it certainly did.
So you played 4 sports in high school?
Yeah, I played football, basketball, baseball, and then I ran track and played. I was on the golf team too. I wasn't very good, but I mean, anything I could compete at. That's what I did. I wanted to compete at anything.
Well, we try to tell our 13-year-old the exact same thing, because he just wants to be a basketball guy and he doesn't want to play baseball. For young athletes in today's world, that we have to start specializing when we're 8 years old on one sport. You got a Heisman candidate that we're talking to today that played 4 sports in high school. That was the number 2 pick in the NFL draft and still made it. I think the common denominator is competing. So I will compete. Like if you came up to the house right now and we're playing Monopoly, I'll try to kill you in Monopoly. It doesn't really matter what sport or what game, it's competing. I'm assuming I think that's what separates the average ones from the special ones, and you were one of the special ones. Why were you one of the special ones? That's what we're trying to figure out.
It's unknown. I didn't have a trailblazer, right? I'm the only Montanan ever to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, right? There are more first round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana ever. So, there really wasn't a blueprint or a pathway. I kind of did it, and I burnt a lot of bridges along the way. So I wouldn't necessarily look at my path as the success story, because I competed at everything, and I pushed some people away, and my behavior for some was seen as was rash and abrasive and things like that. But I thought it was the only way I could get out of that small state and achieve my dream. So there would definitely been things I would have done differently, but I also don't know if that fine line would have continued to get me to where I needed to get to and be successful. I'll never know. I just know that I wish I would have treated people better. I think that's probably if I was treated poorly by anybody, I developed a real defensive and resentful nature about them, and I tried to get back at them. And the only way I knew how to do that was usually embarrass them on a basketball court or a baseball field or a football field. That's just how I knew how to do it, and that's the way I would.
Well, I think two things there. I think number one, I think the special ones, the elite ones. There's a lot of Ryan. There's a lot of quarterbacks out there. There's very few of them who are picked number 2 in the draft, and there's very few of them who are a Heisman candidate. You have to have an edge, and I think the special ones have an edge. And number 2, last time I checked, we're still talking, so you're still alive, which you can go apologize to whoever you want to right now and get that off your chest and then be done with it. Because, listen, as young guys, we're all stupid, especially guys. I mean, we don't even know how to act. I mean, we're morons when we're young and we make stupid decisions and we're out there competing. It's amazing when you go back and say, man, I'm sorry I was a jerk at that moment. People are encouraged to apologize and move on. All right, so all of a sudden you go from Washington State. You're at Washington State. You have a great career, and all of a sudden you're the second pick of the draft, probably because you wanted to be the second pick of the draft, and you end up with the Chargers. So here you go, and you're ready to roll with this 15-year NFL career. Tell us about it.
I maybe thought in my mind that it was going to be as easy as it was in college. And I shouldn't say it was easy. It just, you forget that the guys you play in college, there may be one or if the team's lucky, you have 2 NFL players on that team, where when you get to the next level, every player you're playing against is an NFL player. And you really have to be vigilant about what you're doing. But the biggest thing of that is that your confidence can be swayed so easily. And elite athletes have a very fragile self-esteem when it comes to, or psyche. And if things don't go well early and things kind of start to get piled on, you could really take a turn. And for somebody who didn't necessarily know how to deal with life on life's terms, when things turned poorly, I did as well. And I resorted back to that old behavior of being defensive and resentful and saying what I'd always done, and that's kind of back myself into a corner and fight my way out. And I'd always ended up being successful. This was a different thing. I won my first 2 starts. No one had done that since John Elway in 1983. And I walked into a game at Kansas City and played the worst football game of my life. And I was humiliated, and how I dealt with it was super humiliating as well. I just couldn't figure out how to deal with it. And just because you're a starting NFL quarterback doesn't mean you have any life skills. I mean, you're good at football skills, but the life skills part, you need to learn too. And you have to be willing to ask for that help. And I wasn't that person at that time.
Well, I mean, so helping a young athlete now, go back to that moment where all of a sudden you have a bad outing and all of a sudden stuff starts piling on. Help young guys, because young athletes are going through just as much. Everybody, it doesn't matter if you have a bad outing against the Chiefs and you're on TV on Sunday playing in the NFL. There's kids that have a tough time where they're playing middle school basketball and they think the whole world's caving in on them. So that part doesn't matter. We all go through that. Go back to that moment and help a young athlete. How do you deal with that type of adversity? What should you do? How do you deal with it?
Well, you have to have the understanding that the best way I can put this to you is that you are a flawed human being like everybody else, regardless of the fact that you're playing in the NFL or you're the number 1 recruit coming out of high school. None of that matters. You're not more important than anybody else. And when you're dealing with adversity, it may even be more pronounced because everybody else knows about it. That's different. And the best way you can do that Just like you've been trained by trainers, by strength and conditioning staff, your brain is the biggest and most important muscle you'll ever train. And you find somebody to help train you, and that's usually a therapist. And it's not because you're crazy. It's not because you're weak. It's because you are an elite athlete. Utilize everything you can to be the most fundamentally, technically, and spiritually sound athlete you can be if you want to do this for a long period of time.
So, I mean, you got, but, admitting we got issues and going to see somebody, I mean, that's like for a guy, I mean, you just can't do that, and you look weak. Looking back on it, that's probably what you thought at that moment. And how do when did you get over that?
Well, I mean, I had to be humbled, in a way where I woke up in a prison cell. And so that's my hope, is that it doesn't take that kind of that humbling for others to get to that place. That's why I continue to go out and speak and tell my story. That's exactly why I do it, because I don't want anybody ever to be as miserable as I was, and where it had to take me. And that's my hope. And usually when I walk in, I ask the question, what are you willing to do to be the best of the best? And if your answer isn't anything, then there's nothing I can really do for you, because you have to be able to surrender and accept help. You can't be the one that's always right. You can't, because you're not. Nobody is. No one's perfect. You need help. You just have to be willing to accept it. And that's a huge part of it.
Are you working with young kids? Are you working, because I think it'd be great working with young quarterbacks? You need to have your own quarterback camp. You need to have your own elite camp. Are you working with young guys? I know you're doing some football stuff for radio, and you're doing football stuff for TV. Are you working with young kids?
Every opportunity I get, I speak to a lot of middle schools and high schools, and things of that nature, but not any one-on-one scenarios. Realistically, I don't know if I have enough time right now. My schedule is pretty darn busy, which I'm happy that it is, but I don't know if I necessarily have the patience either to kind of be in the coaching realm. But I'm more than happy to consult and be a voice if I can, if someone's willing and wants to hear that.
Well, I'm dealing with a lot of coaches now, and I will tell you this: coaches who have coaching taken from them really struggle. All right, kind of it's like the shuttle coming back into the Earth's atmosphere. The struggles coming back in. When you're an athlete or you're a coach and you go back to the real world, it is quite of an adjustment for a coach. I'm assuming, being the number 2 pick in the draft and a Heisman finalist and Ryan Leaf, coming back to the real world was a bit of an adjustment.
Well, it always is going to be, because no matter what, no matter how far I disappear or go away, my name gets brought up every April. They consider me one of the biggest draft busts of all time, and then being drafted alongside arguably the greatest to play the position in Peyton Manning, that keeps my name in the media. I had to learn to accept it, understand, and move on. And sometimes psychologically that affects people in a different manner. And I've been doing a lot of research and kind of looking into that, how the word bust and how the media criticism and things like that have affected certain professional players that didn't meet expectations, and how they've been able to move on with their life in a positive and healthy way, and how some others, like myself, dove into this negative and toxic version of it and either haven't come out of it or like in my case, come out the other side and understand that, it really wasn't that important. The importance was placed on by others and myself, thinking that this was the end all be all, and this was the only thing important that I was going to do, which isn't the truth and not the case. So it's important to have that understanding that I'm just like everybody else, and I have to really work on the things that make me a solid human being before any of the other stuff even becomes a reality.
It's the same thing about a coach, because we're trying to help young coaches too. You lose 4 games in a row, and you put so much on yourself, and that you absolutely lose your mind. It is the same thing what you went through. You think so much of yourself, and you think everybody is putting all this on me. We're all flawed. We all screw up. We all lose games. If there's 500 games yesterday in college basketball, there were 500 winners and there were 500 losers. That's just part of it. and then in 5 years, nobody even remembers who won or lost those games. But we still think it's the biggest thing in the world. And I'm assuming coming out, here's the deal with your deal. If you asked 500 quarterbacks, would you like to go to Washington State, have that success? You did play in the Rose Bowl, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you played in the Rose Bowl. You were a Heisman finalist. You were number 2 pick in a draft, and then so-called you were the biggest flop. Bang, bang, bang. Would you all take that career? 500 out of 500 would do it. So as you look at yourself, I wouldn't think of yourself as a flop, because what you did was you got dusty, you got blood on your face, you got sweat in there, you got in the arena. As Roosevelt would say, you got in the arena. It's better to be in the arena and fail than be too scared to get in the arena at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had to just have had to have a shift in my perspective and understanding. 2 years ago, there was a study done about NBA and NFL players, and there were 91,775 eligible players in football and in basketball in the NCAA eligible for the draft. 303 of those, which is less than 1%, were drafted into the NBA and the NFL. Those statistics right there are, you don't look at them. You're so in your own bubble, and your expectations are higher than anybody else's, and then all of a sudden you hear all the constant criticism, and you're depressed as it is, and you start to believe it, and you really do, and it takes you down a path that some never come out of. And that's what I was talking about. I've just been doing a lot of research and understanding a lot about the human psyche, especially those who were considered to be so great and were great and have to be recognized still that they were great, that it didn't work out at the next level. And there's a difference in greatness. That's all, and understanding. And there's some who have moved on and done very well for themselves and had a better understanding about what life truly is. And it just took me, an extra long time to finally figure that out.
A lot of people don't ever figure it out. But we're going to fast forward through a lot of this, because I just want you to help other people. And so number one, you go from the Chargers, and then you take a cup of coffee with a couple other NFL teams, and then you find yourself in a jam, and then you really find yourself in jail, laying down on a bed in jail, and then you say, what? And then what did you do? How is your psyche? What did you do to get out? Because most of us we may not be in jail, but we're going to be at the bottom. Everybody's going to be at the bottom sometime in their life, and that was your bottom. How did you get from the bottom out of that deal and to who you are right now, who is a great dad and a husband and a productive human?
Well, it really came down to, a 180-degree lifestyle change, and it happened while in prison. My prison roommate was a Afghan Iraqi war veteran, and he tried to better himself every day he was in there. And I wasn't. I certainly wasn't. I was as self-loathing and angry as I'd ever been. And one day he'd had enough, I guess, of watching me mope around, and he confronted me and told me I had my head buried in the sand and that I didn't understand the value I had, not only to the men in there, but for when I got out. And so he suggested we go down to the prison library and help prisoners who didn't know how to read learn how to read. And that's what we did. And I didn't go, willingly. I went, but I wasn't open-minded. And I saw men who were being vulnerable in the most unvulnerable place where you're not supposed to show any vulnerability, and ask for help. And we did. We helped them. And I found out eventually that I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. And that was going to have to be the foundation of who I was moving forward. And it could never, ever again be about me. It had to always be about another human being. And that's what I've tried to do. I've messed up and not met those expectations on a daily basis, but I've been more aware of it, and I try to wake up and do it again the next day the best way I can. And it's gotten me this far, and I'm going to continue to place it at the forefront of my life, because it's really truly given me the life of my dreams now.
Well, that is, I got a buddy of mine. I got a buddy of mine who was coaching. He was coaching college football, and he retired, got mad, and kind of left, and he was struggling, didn't have a purpose, and started actually helping Parkinson's patients work out and do their exercise in the afternoon. And he fell absolutely in love with it because he was coaching and helping others. So I think, it sounds like you had that same, all of a sudden that same moment that he had, all of a sudden you help others. They don't care that Ryan Leaf was a football player. That dude had no care. He didn't probably even know. He was just appreciative that you were helping him learn how to read.
Well, who knows or how I viewed it or what, but it put me on a different path, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I can't say enough about that.
Tell as we close here, tell regular people, not just athletes, or they can be athletes. How did you fight? How did you get over? Most people where you were, stay there. All right, because life screwed me. I got screwed. I'm in jail. I'm done. How do you fight every single day, whether it be with addiction, whether it be with coming out of depression? How do you fight every day? How do you do it? And give us some advice.
Just surrender and acceptance. You have to first surrender and ask for the help, and then you have to be willing to accept what that help is, because a lot of times people are, they can ask for help, but then when you lay it out in front of them and what it looks like, they still go back to, hey, I'll do it my way. Our way doesn't work. Our way, in my case, takes me to a prison cell. So I needed to surrender and accept help, and that's exactly what I did. I recommend that for anybody, and have an understanding that this too shall pass. It really will. People really look at my story and see this drastic thing, but I don't mean to underestimate what my struggle looked like. It was just a rough patch I had to get through, like anybody else. Mine was just done in a very public manner. That's all. And it probably saved my life because of that. Every time I messed up, there were consequences firmly placed at my feet because of what I did. There's those that are going through exactly what I went through, that are in the darkness, never seen again. And that's the reason why we continue to reach out and try to help, so none of that has to happen and we don't lose another precious human life.
You need to be speaking at the. Do you speak with the NFL young guys? Does the NFL have you speak at all?
They had me as a mentor for some of the young men at the scouting combine a couple years ago. And every opportunity I get, I'm grateful for, and I take the opportunity to speak my story and just continue to be out there for people.
I mean, there's very few Bradys. There's a lot more guys who are gonna have a moment or two and have an NFL career for 2 years and be done. And those guys need a lot of help. And look at you, you're killing it. You're doing great. You're happy. You're successful without football. If you were Mike Leach's offensive coordinator, y'all be scoring 98 points a game instead of
I don't know about that.
Instead of 88 points. Would you play as crazy as he is? He as nuts as we think he is?
I think he's pretty just bare and simple. He just has a routine. This is what he does. He doesn't really move off that line. If you talk to him about football, you're not going to get too much interesting. He's been doing the same thing for 25, 30 years. But you want to talk to him about marriage and other worldly things, you're going to get some crazy answers, just because it's just where his mind goes. He's really focused on football, and he's got a lot more time to think about other things because he does the same thing over and over every day when it comes to football, and he's been very successful at it.
So he's very simple.
Very simple.
But they're throwing that football. I mean, he started doing that 112 years ago, and he's continued to. But people are catching up, but he's still successful. Why is that?
Well, because people deviate from what he does. They change it. I mean, some have altered their things and been successful at other places. Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, they run the ball a little bit more. Mike Leach has done the same thing the entirety. He will not change because he's been successful. And you don't fix what ain't broken, in his opinion and a lot of people's opinion. If you can win in Lubbock at Texas Tech and win in Pullman at Washington State, there's something to be said about that. He's a winner.
For all you basketball coaches out there listening to this podcast, and I'm telling you, I talk about Rick Byrd at Belmont all the time. That is the guy who is doing very similar stuff that he did 20 years ago, and all he does is win 20 to 25 games a year. I think they've won 20 games for like the last 15 years. Every single year, he's going to be on a Hall of Fame from Belmont University, and he does it, and he does it. So find something that you do well. You don't have to be tricky, and just continue working on what you do, because it's worked pretty good for Leach. I mean, that guy has done an amazing job everywhere, and he hadn't had very good jobs. Not that Washington State's not a very good job, but Washington State is not the place that all the high-level people go to out there, correct?
I agree. Yeah, I think that it's important that everybody and anybody who has dealt with anything in their life, your human experience, share it. That's how you can be of service to another human being. A lot of people think it's other ways. Donate money, donate time. You simply telling your story, being relatable to somebody else, will be exactly that. I defy anybody not to have the most peaceful night of sleep after being of service to another human being that day. I defy anybody to not have that peaceful night of sleep.
I think that's a great way to end this. Hey, thanks so much for your time. Good luck. If we can ever do anything for you here, yell. But we really appreciate your story and really appreciate your honesty.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Coach.
All right, buddy. Take care. Thanks, man.